doing these double stops at the end, towards the end of the first section of the Mendelssohn, and these are tricky because the intervals between them are a little interesting. We've got our G, like an A sharp, a C sharp, basically this diminished arpeggio scale. We've got a lot of minor thirds. So if we don't know what it's supposed to sound like, we should definitely listen to it and make sure that we can shoot our intonation ear ahead of us. Can we play the first one? And while we're playing that first one, hear the next one, and hear the next one, and so on. So that's really the first step. And then we have the octaves. So depending on our hand shape, we might decide to do these as regular octaves, and we might decide to do them as fingered octaves. I personally like to do them as regular octaves. I have long fingers, but my knuckles are pretty, like my hands are pretty narrow. So for me, doing like the fingering that might be like maybe starting on a 2 and then doing like a 1, 3, 2, 4, this sort of thing, it's a little bit ridiculous. It's just not as comfortable, but for someone who has a wider hand, I think that would be really appropriate perhaps. So I'm just going to talk about the regular octaves, and we can always touch on fingered octaves another time. But I really like to practice just the single lines, but not like just this way, but actually having the other finger in there so I keep my frame. So I would probably start with the lower one first. And so you might think, well, what is this upper fingering? You know, is it in tune or whatever? If I've got my G, is that 3 in tune? It doesn't really matter at this point, because as long as it's like in the ballpark, what we're doing is we're just tuning each one and then we'll tune them together. And to do this, I also like to do some little like a kind of a chained bowing, where I'm going to be able to hear the little shift sounds in between, and that will be a little bit easier to then eventually take those out and just go back to just the détaché, or I don't know, it's almost like a martelé or something. It's pretty intense, but let's try this. So if we do a G, and then I would go, we'll do that top note too. So yeah, it's weird. I mean, the bow, I don't know, I've done this so many times. The bow wants for me to go on both strings, and just have to stick with the one. So that's a little tricky, but it's kind of a mental game, right? And then you could take the top line. So I'm just pretending that I can, you know, the open G's down here for this first one, and then that one. So you could do each one several times, but I really think that that's a good way to practice that. And then when you put them back together, if you're still struggling, my teachers always told me to listen to the bottom note, and I think that that's really helpful. I think it's also helpful to make sure that we're not gripping and that the thumb is really supporting us, and also that maybe you have to kind of think about like, are we getting into trouble because maybe we're moving one finger more than the other? In this case, I mean, in some cases with double stops, different double stops, maybe like thirds or something, it can be helpful. Maybe from this third, say, if I was going to do that combo there, maybe I would kind of lead with my 4 to set it up so it's high enough. With this one, since everything's chunking up with this 1 4 1 4 1 4, I feel like it's funny, but it's almost like the middle of my hand, the fingers that aren't actually being played, that are the ones that I just have to kind of scoot along. They're hovering, but I have to make sure that that frame moves evenly and it doesn't kind of turn into a situation where I'm leaning, say, back into a finger, or that would be the common thing. I suppose I could also be leaning up, but I think that's a little bit less usual. Anyhow, the final thing that I wanted to mention is just if you are doing just the regular octaves, there are those points where like you're, say, on the C sharps, and then you're going to go over to the E's. You just have to kind of let your fingers kind of fall over, and as it's at the same time as the shift is happening. So that can be something that, sometimes we end up wanting to jump too much. But just like any shift, like if you were going from that, where am I? There's the C sharp. If I'm going from that C sharp down to that E, and I was just making a normal shift, it's not like I would jump down there, right? I would have some transport motion kind of down the string. I would stay in contact so that we just are aware of the distance that we've traveled. Of course, in a case like getting into that, da 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 dum, I am jumping up because I've just come from that open string, and I don't want to hear a big glissando sound. So it's not like you wouldn't ever jump. It's just that these are going to go by so fast that we just need to chunk them up and stay really connected, almost like we're ice skaters or something. I'm just like going to glide over all the strings. Anyway, hopefully that's helpful, and you can break it down, build it back up. Sometimes we have to break things down and build them back up again until finally they're set, and then who knows, we go away for a few years, we have to come back and do it all again. But the nice thing about the octaves is once we've practiced them, and there's so many in this piece, we start to get more familiar, and we start to feel that spacing that we have. Of course, it's going to be bigger in lower positions, and it's going to kind of crunch up in higher positions, but it's all pretty perfectly planned because we're coming in towards the violin body, and our hand's going to kind of want to crunch in anyway. And then as we go above, it's going to it feels pretty natural. Again, if we can just isolate a feeling of that kind of centered feeling of the hand and just have that travel and chunk up as we go. And if you get that one, the next one is much easier. So good luck.